You are not here by accident. But it wasn't a choice. It was survival. You found these words because something inside you is tired of running. Carl Jung once said that what we call fate is often just the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. For years, you wore a mask. You smiled when you wanted to cry. You erased yourself piece by piece to keep others whole and the world. They called you kind, patient, selfless, and maybe that is why you've found these words, because something deep inside you is tired of running from itself. There is a voice within you, ancient and unbroken, that has been calling for years. You feel it when you wake up tired, even after sleep. You sense it when you smile for others, but feel empty inside. You know it in the quiet loneliness that follows you, even in a crowded room. And here is the twist, the part that changes everything. The life you've been living is not truly yours. The person you think you are is not the self Jung spoke of, but only the mask, the persona, a mask you built long ago to stay safe. But masks crack, and once yours begins to fall, you will meet the truth. The self you've hidden is far more terrifying and far more powerful than the role you've been playing. The gift you carry was not born in sunlight. It was shaped in the shadows. Most people think sensitivity, intuition, or empathy is a blessing given at birth, but the truth is harder to face. These abilities were often forged in fire, molded by fear, sharpened by pain. Picture a child who learns, far too early, that love has conditions. A child who realizes that being loud, being messy, being themselves was dangerous. So they adapt. They smile when they want to cry. They stay quiet when they long to speak. They study every shift in the room, every sigh, every silence, because safety depends on it. This is how the gift is born, not from divine grace, but from survival, from a nervous system that became a radar, scanning constantly. Who is angry? Who is sad? Who must I fix so I can finally breathe? Jung said that the greatest wounds often carry the seeds of our greatest strengths. And it is true. This wound gave you the ability to read people, to feel what others cannot. But do not mistake its origin. What the world applauds as your compassion and patience may, in fact, be the scar of a child who learned that their own needs were less important than keeping everyone else calm. This is the first crack in the illusion. Your gift was not a gift. It was armor. For years, maybe decades, you have walked through life like a mirror that reflects everyone else, but never shows your own face. You became what was needed, what was safe, what kept the peace. You learned to shape-shift into the friend who always listens, the child who never complains, the partner who absorbs storms without breaking, and people praised you for it. They called you kind, patient, selfless, but deep inside, you know it was never a choice. It was training. Growing up in a world where your real feelings felt dangerous, you became fluent in the language of others' emotions. You could read anger in a slammed door before a single word was spoken. You could sense disappointment in silence, louder than any scream. You learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced, because failing to do so felt like failing to survive. This is not divinity, though the world may mistake it for such. This is survival wisdom written into your body, and the cost of carrying it, you vanished. Piece by piece, year after year, you erased yourself to keep others whole. The mirror still reflects, but where is your reflection? For years, perhaps even decades, you have walked through life like a mirror, reflecting everyone else, yet never revealing your own face. You became what was needed, what was safe, what kept the peace. You turned yourself into the friend who always listens, the child who never complains, the partner who absorbs storms without breaking. And for this, you were praised. People called you kind, patient, selfless. But you know, deep down, that it was never really a choice. It was training. When you grow up in a world where your own feelings feel dangerous, you learn a different language, not the language of your own heart, but the language of others. You could sense anger in a slammed door before a single word was spoken. You felt disappointment in silence, louder than any scream. You became fluent in predicting needs before they were voiced, because failing to do so felt like failing to survive. This is not divinity, though others may mistake it for such. It is survival wisdom etched into your body. But here is the cost. In becoming what everyone else needed, you disappeared. Piece by piece, year after year, you erased yourself to keep others whole. And one day, you look into the mirror and realize there is no reflection left. At first, it comes quietly, a restlessness you cannot explain, a sudden heaviness in your chest when you agree to things you do not want, a strange fatigue that no amount of sleep erases. You brush it off, but deep down you know something in you is no longer willing to live the old way. Then the body begins to speak. Headaches, tightness in the stomach, a throat that closes when you try to say no, but forces a yes instead. These are not random symptoms. They are messages from the part of you that has been buried too long. And when the body is ignored, the dreams arrive. Jung knew this well. The psyche speaks in symbols when words will not do. You dream of houses with broken doors, of strangers wearing your clothes, of voices calling your name but never showing their faces. These are not nightmares. They are instructions. The broken house is your fractured inner world. The stranger is the mask you wear. The faceless voices are the parts of you waiting to return. The lie cannot hold forever. The soul is patient, but it is never silent. And once it begins to stir, no amount of pretending will put it back to sleep. So the questions begin to rise, sharp and unsettling. Who am I when no one is looking? Who am I if I am not needed? What remains when I stop bending myself to please others? At first, the answers do not come, only silence, only emptiness. It feels like standing in a dark room with no windows, no doors, no sound but your own heartbeat. And this silence terrifies you because your whole life has been built on noise, the voices of others, the demands, the constant roles to play. Without those roles, you feel like nothing, as if you are dissolving, and in truth, you are. Because when an identity has been built on pleasing, on sacrificing, on disappearing, letting go of it feels like death. And in a way, it is. But listen closely. Jung taught that in every death lies the seed of rebirth. The void is not your enemy. It is the threshold. The silence that feels like annihilation is actually the soil where the true self begins to stir. It is terrifying, yes, but this darkness is holy. The death of the mask is the birth of the soul. The awakening does not begin with peace. It begins with rage. Yes, rage, the feeling you were taught to fear, to bury, to call ugly. For so long you silenced it, because anger in your childhood meant danger. Anger meant rejection. Anger meant losing love. So you swallowed it down until it turned into exhaustion, anxiety, and quiet despair. But now, as the mask begins to crack, the fire returns. You see it in flashes. When someone interrupts you, when someone dismisses your needs, when someone assumes you will carry what is not yours. Suddenly, the patience you once wore like armor feels unbearable. Suddenly, you are no longer willing to trade your peace for the comfort of others. Do not run from this anger. It is not poison. It is medicine. It is the sacred fire that burns away exploitation. It is the voice that rises from deep within and declares, "No more." Jung believed that what we repress becomes shadow, and when that shadow is finally allowed to speak, it does not come gently. It roars. But this roar is holy. This is not the anger that destroys you. This is the anger that saves you. It is the flame that says, "I will no longer disappear for you. I will no longer bow to your comfort. I am here. I exist." And then comes the shadow. For years, you tried to bury it. The anger, the desire, the needs you were told were too much. You pushed them down, denied them, dressed them in shame. You told yourself, "That is not me." But the truth is, it has always been you. The shadow waits patiently. It waits in your dreams, in your triggers, in the faces of the people who irritate you the most. And when it finally steps forward, it does not come to punish you. It comes to return what you lost. Listen to it. The shadow says, "I am your hunger for rest. I am your voice that wanted to scream. I am your longing to be held without earning it. I am the anger you swallowed to keep the peace. I am the truth you buried to survive." Jung called the shadow the doorway to wholeness. You cannot become who you are meant to be while disowning half of yourself. Integration is not war, it is a homecoming. So when the shadow knocks, do not turn away. Open the door, because it carries back the pieces of you that you left behind. And without those pieces, you can never be whole. Your path is not only about awakening, it is about remembering, about calling back every piece of yourself that you gave away in order to survive. Think of the moments. Every time you said yes when your whole body screamed no. Every time you smiled when you wanted to cry. Every time you carried the weight of another while your own shoulders shook. Every time you silenced your voice because speaking felt dangerous. Each one of these moments was a fracture, a small soul loss, a piece of you left behind at the altar of approval. But now, the work is to retrieve them, to walk back through those memories, not to stay in pain, but to gather what is yours, to whisper to that younger self, "You did not deserve this. You are safe now. Come home." This is not quick work. It is not a single moment of healing. It is a slow gathering, like picking up sacred fragments scattered across a lifetime. Jung knew this as individuation, the process of becoming whole by reclaiming what was exiled. Piece by piece, you begin to feel yourself returning, and the emptiness that once felt unbearable slowly begins to fill, not with noise, not with others' demands, but with your own soul coming back to life. When you stop living for others, the first thing you meet is not freedom, it is silence. It feels strange at first. The phone doesn't buzz as much. The people who once drained you drift away. The constant noise of "what do they need?" quiets, and you are left with an unfamiliar sound, your own voice. And in that silence comes loneliness, not the loneliness of being abandoned, but the loneliness of no longer abandoning yourself. Jung said that to confront the self is a kind of death, the death of masks, of roles, of false duties. What dies is the person you pretended to be. What remains is the raw essence you've been searching for. It is frightening. You will want to run back to the old patterns just to feel surrounded again. But if you can endure the stillness, you will see that loneliness is not emptiness. It is space. It is the sacred ground where your true life can finally begin to grow. Something begins to change in the quiet. At first, it is subtle, a steady breath, a clearer thought, a small but unshakable sense that you no longer need to bend to survive. Then it deepens. The masks you once wore feel heavy, unnecessary. The old fear of being disliked starts to dissolve. What rises in its place is not arrogance, but a rooted calm, a knowing. Jung called this process individuation, the becoming of the self. It is not the creation of a new person, but the return to who you always were before the wounds, before the roles, before the world told you who you had to be. And in that return, there is rebirth. You notice it in small ways. Boundaries spoken without guilt, rest taken without shame, desires honored without apology. For the first time, you are not surviving, you are living. This is the paradox of the empath's journey. The very sensitivity that once felt like a curse becomes your compass. The very wounds that fractured you become the soil for your wholeness. And the loneliness you once feared reveals itself as the sacred threshold of your transformation. So what becomes of the empath when they stop living for others? At first, there is collapse, then silence, then rebirth. You may lose people you thought would stay forever. You may feel the cold sting of isolation. You may even doubt yourself in the middle of the night, wondering if you've made a mistake. But listen carefully. That fear is only the ghost of your old self clinging to its fading mask. The deeper truth is this: you were never meant to be consumed by the needs of others. You were meant to carry your own flame. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And though that path is hard, it is the only path that leads you home. When the empath chooses themselves, they are no longer just an empath. They are an awakened soul, a self that feels not to survive, but to live. And perhaps the final twist is this: the world does not lose your compassion when you stop pleasing. It gains your truth, and truth, unlike sacrifice, does not drain. It liberates. Your journey is not to be everything for everyone. It is to finally, and without apology, be you.